everyone. Welcome back to the arena. This is MD, joined by Kobe, and once again another special guest, our second one virtual of the. This is now our. I'm still losing count of our conversations. Ninth. At some point, we're not going to fit on two hands. That's kind of around the corner, which is pretty cool. But before we get into our ninth conversation, as we always do, let's show love and appreciation to those that have. Been listening to the show, have been passing word of mouth the show to their friends and whatnot, and the amount of positive feedback and reinforcement that we've been getting continues to grow and motivate. So thank you all, and hoping to deliver just another great conversation here.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Matt here. As always, thank you all. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you to everyone that listens every week. Thank you if you've opened up one show. I mean, that means the world to us. We've got one of my best friends here, Shaun Parrella. I met Shaun 5 years ago, something like that. 5 years ago, I met him at my first job in Champaign. I don't know why the hell Shaun came from Florida to Champaign, Illinois. We'll go into that a little bit more. But Shaun, in all seriousness, Shaun's one of my really, really good friends. He's just a genuinely good person, and I'm super excited for you guys to kind of listen to this conversation today, and I'm super excited to have the conversation. So without further ado, Shaun, why don't you kind of just introduce yourself, provide a little bit of a background of who you are. Obviously, most of these people that we've interviewed so far have come from or born here in Chicago, so why don't you just kind of talk about where you're from and how you've gotten to where you are.
Yeah, of course. First up, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on the podcast with you guys. I'm just fired up to be able to discuss some of these topics that are particularly important to me. I think what you guys are doing with the podcast is fantastic. But there is one thing, if we're being 100% honest, when Kobe first texted me about having me on, my heart sank for a second because, me and Kobe have had those one-on-one deep conversations, but for the majority of people that know me, except for a select few, I'm very closed a little bit. I'm not as open with my emotions and my feelings and even just sharing what I'm up to, good or bad. So, this is definitely out of my comfort zone, but, that's what it's all about. And
yes.
Yeah, getting outside your comfort zone is the only way you're going to grow. I mean, we talk about this all the time. So, yeah, a little about me. My name's Shaun. I currently live in Tampa, Florida. I grew up in a suburb of Jacksonville, Florida. Shout out Fleming Island. And from there, I went to Florida State University, had a great time in college, 4 years. And after that is when I moved up to Champaign, Illinois. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I couldn't even locate Champaign on a map before I moved up there. So it's all funny how it works out. But I'm back in Tampa, like I said, and I work in commercial banking, particularly commercial lending, underwriting, that whole ordeal. So it's all good on my end. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to step into the arena with you guys.
Yeah, I love that. Look at that. No, I mean that's great. So I guess on that you glossed over it so quickly, but you went from Jacksonville, Florida, to Champaign, Illinois, or Florida State. Graduated from Florida State, and you took a job in Central Illinois.
Yep.
Just walk us through what prompted you to take that role? I mean, I'm so grateful you did because I would have never met you otherwise, but just talk through what was going through your mind when you decided to take that role and just the jump from going somewhere completely new to you. Obviously, you don't know anyone, don't even know anything about the state.
Yeah, so when I was wrapping up my last year or two of college, I was still unsure of what I wanted to do professionally. And my dad's in finance, he was in banking, so I kind of just followed in his footsteps and thought that would give me the good base to start my career. So I started looking online for some management training programs with some local banks, and I came across this bank that had an office in Fort Myers, Florida. So, I was like, okay, Fort Myers would be nice to live in. So I went ahead and applied and did the interview process. And, at the end of the interview, they were like, we would love for you to come in our management training program at our headquarters. And I was like, sweet, that sounds awesome. They're like, by the way, our headquarters is in Champaign, Illinois. And I'm like, where is that? So I looked into it and, I thought long and hard about it. And I was like, I've lived in Florida my whole life. Like, let's do it. Like, let's just take a leap of faith. I don't know anyone up there. All I knew was I was going into a program with 4 other guys that were around my age, fresh out of college. So, I took that as an opportunity to explore something new. And went up to Champaign, packed my car, drove up there, and didn't look back. And I'm so grateful that I did. It worked out. I'm not the biggest believer in everything happens for a reason, but being up there and living with you and some of the other guys we worked with, and you just being so open and introducing me to your friend group just really helped me out during that period. So that's what got me to Champaign, and I was up there close to 18 months, but one winter up there was enough for me. I was ready to get back down to Florida, so as soon as I could get back down to their Fort Myers office, that's what I did.
You said everything happens for a reason. You actually said you don't believe in it, particularly. That struck me because the guy sitting next to me I'm pretty sure also has a similar viewpoint. I'd like to hear it really quickly. Like I personally, I kind of think it does. I think everything tends to happen for a reason. Like everything, it's totally in your head, but everything for me tends to work itself out, and so that's why I think that things do tend to happen for a reason. But MD, what are your thoughts there? Because I know we've had this conversation.
Yeah, I'm like the guy who's like, I don't necessarily believe in soulmate or love at first sight or destiny or fate or everything happens for a reason. I question and challenge a lot of that point of view. I think you can use everything in light of like your experiences as fuel or as like a catalyst to make things out of that. But I think things just happen, and what you do with those happenings, more times than not, should be in your control. What you make of the moment, what you make of the experience, and then when you look back, you can say, okay, well, I made a really good friend, and I used this to propel my career. Well, you made that the reason. Like you made it mean something, in my opinion. I believe in like manifestation. Like you created it, and so that's I guess where I come from. Not to lose my own train of thought there, but that's I guess how I think about like everything happening for a reason.
Yeah, to me everything for my set, like everything's played out in a way where I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like in the moment, you're like, what the fuck? Why did this happen? But then hindsight, every time I reflect, I'm like, okay, well that makes sense, and I'm glad. And even the shit that happens to you that sucks, it's like there's still stuff you can learn from it. So to me, maybe it's just a mindset thing and always looking at things from a more optimistic and self-reflection standpoint in a way to kind of improve. But anyways,
well, where are you at with that, Shaun? But you just heard two perspectives.
And he said typically no. He said typically
right.
He doesn't.
Like,
but
did my explanation resonate, or do you view it differently?
I relate to more so what you were talking about, MD. I don't know if everything happens for a reason, but it's what you make of the situation, and sometimes those things propel you forward or propel you even downwards. So it's just a matter of how you handle things, and you just got to roll with the punches. Things happen, and it's what you make of it. So that's where I stand on it, pretty close to where you are.
So growing up in Jacksonville, you have, if I'm correct, you have one sister, right?
Yeah, I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than me. She's awesome. I look up to her.
Yeah, like how's your relationship with your sister? How's your relationship with your family more broadly?
Yeah, it's funny because when we lived together when we were children and we were growing up, my sister and I were not close at all. We were honestly polar opposites. She was the more straight edge, kept to herself, never caused any problems at school or with the parents, and I think when I came along, it was a shock to my parents because I was the troublemaker. I was the class clown. I was always, getting into things that I shouldn't. And, me and my sister didn't have a lot in common until we both matured. And I think post-college has helped out a lot. And I've gone to visit her plenty of times. And, we are just so much more relatable and mature at this level now where we have a really good relationship. And I always look forward to talking with her. And that's someone that I can actually really confide in. And we're still very different as people, but our relationship has flourished a lot in recent years, and I'm grateful for that.
Because you had mentioned, like, earlier, the first thing we were talking about, how you're not normally very open.
Yeah.
Maybe closer to the vest. If there's something you would never tell anybody but had to tell one person, do you think your sister would be that go-to person for you?
Yeah, she'd be up there for sure. I mean, I have some close friends that I trust with everything. I mean, me and Matt have had some deep conversations. Matt, Covey, I never call you Matt.
I know I do it too on the
Yeah,
story.
yeah. But I mean, my sister is definitely someone that I can rely on, and especially career wise, if I need any input or advice from another source, she's a great resource for me. So yeah, she's definitely one of the most important people in my life that I can talk to.
So, when was there like a time in your life where you had been kind of closed off? Was there a time in your life where you were just, what kind of prompted you to open up to the few people that you have? Because I think about myself, and for the longest time I was closed off to basically everybody, or I thought I was open, but I really wasn't. I was hiding parts of myself. Mm-hmm. And there obviously came a point where now I really do feel like I'm an open book for the most part. I feel comfortable doing that. Like, was there a time in your life that you can point back to of like, okay, this is when I started to become a little bit more vulnerable with both myself and other people?
Yeah, I think there were some events that happened in my life that kind of led me there, and I always suppressed my emotions. I didn't know how to handle them or process them until the point where it kind of spilled over. And I mean, one of the particular events that happened that I've talked to you about, Covey, was back in 2019. My father got sick and ended up passing away in a short amount of time, and processing that and trying to handle that was really tough for me, and being able to open up more in that circumstance just really helped me deal with it and grieve with it. And that's what it felt good to let some of those emotions out, but I was still very particular with the people that I would confide in and trust with certain things that are going on in my life or certain emotions.
What do you need that person to be? Like, what makes that person the person that Shaun says, hey, yeah, I can open up to this person?
Someone who's just willing to listen and understand how you're feeling. Like, I'm not telling you this, whatever's going on, because I need you to tell me what to do. I don't need a solution. Most of the time, I'm not looking for advice. I'm just looking for someone that I trust and that I know really cares for me and has the best intentions for me, and vice versa. So just having someone that can listen and understand, and just doesn't even have to relate, but just be there for you.
And that doesn't sound overly complicated, and
right.
Yet perhaps so few people you can find that. And I'm just curious, like, in your mind, like, what makes a listener a listener? Like, what signals to you that this person's listening to me, or this person's an adequate listener?
Yeah, I mean, some people that we've gotten close to, like, having deep conversations, and I can tell they kind of change the subject, or they don't feel as comfortable going deep like that. So, I can kind of get that and be like, okay, I'll back off a little bit. Maybe this person doesn't want to have this conversation. And someone that will generally, just check up on you and cares how you're doing. And that shows. You can tell when someone actually cares about you, and, once I get that feeling, it makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, and I think one word you said there was someone you trust.
Yeah. And
as you were answering the question, I was trying to think about it for myself. And I think that trust comes from, for me, like, something I look for is someone that's willing to open up to me.
Right.
And the only way that happens is if I open up to them first. So if I open up and, I might kind of, start slow, and the person kind of, there's just a sense of level of uncomfortableness. Mm-hmm. I'll kind of pull back a little bit. But if someone answers it with empathy and is like, again, what you said is great. It's a lot of times I think people want to respond with a solution or how they can relate to it, and that's never what someone's looking for. Like, we had a really deep conversation in Florida most recently, mm-hmm. and I didn't even have a response, because all I was doing was listening and just like feeling what you were feeling. And like that like really just like that, it just, you feel like sometimes you need someone to take some of that pain away and feel it with that person, whether it's pain, whether it's joy. but empathy is, I think, a really hard thing to build. And I think the only way you can have empathy is through being vulnerable yourself. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think...
No, totally. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Well, it's just, I think what we talk about with vulnerability, empathy, these aren't easy things to do. And when things are not easy to do, you need leadership. You need somebody to be a leader. And by example, by demonstration, by behavior. And then to your point, you're more likely to incite somebody to reciprocate that back. So give you an example. If you're trying to jump into a deep end of water, right, figuratively, metaphorically, you're trying to jump into the deep end, get into a deep conversation, a vulnerable conversation, and it's you and your buddy, and you want to jump in that water with your buddy. It's one thing to say, hey, come on, like, let's do this. Like, you jump in. Come on, jump in with me. Or jump in. It's another thing if you're the first one to do it, you're more likely to then give them the comfort level to do that with you. And so it takes a leader to do that. And I think, Shaun, maybe you can allude to it, but like the times where you were most open to Covey, did you tend to find that what Covey's saying is true, where he had a start and like he maybe took a leadership position in that dynamic?
Yeah, a little bit, honestly, because like I said about myself, I'm not quick to open up, and I feel so comfortable with Matt, and he opened up a little bit to me, and we both, kind of.
Oh, I opened up. I mean, you were the first
did.
person that outside of my family, you were the first person I told. You're the first guy I told, which to me had a little bit more. It really hit a little bit different. And I think I've told you this story, and I'll tell it now, and you can finish your thought, because I think I've told you it once before. But I remember there was something, and that's why I think it just pays. If anyone's listening right now, it pays to just be a kind person, because some of the littlest shit that you say, you might not even think twice about, and it might really resonate with someone else. And I say that because me and Shaun were just having a conversation one day, and he was telling a story, and he had mentioned that one of his friends. They were randomly out and they came back from the bars or something along those lines, and the guy was just like, and he was drunk, I think, and he was like, guys, like, I'm gay. And Shaun's response, and Shaun told me this story, and he was like, oh, dude, we started laughing, like, we don't care. And this was a year ago. Like, Shaun had no idea what I was going through, but the littlest thing right there is why I felt I had so much trust in Shaun, along with a bunch of other reasons, but because he didn't need to know who I was to respond that way. And I think that's why it just pays to be a kind person, because you never know what's going to hit with someone, what someone might be dealing with that actually resonates. But anyway, continue your thought. I just want to get that out there, because I think that just shows how good of a person you are.
Yeah, no, I want to continue on that point. Like, I remember back when, like, high school, like, we would have these immature conversations, like, how would you feel if one of our close friends came out as, gay or bisexual? And everyone's like, it might make it a little bit weird. And then when the scenario actually played out, first with one of my other good friends, and then, when you came to me and told me a little bit about what you were going through, it didn't change a single thing. I mean, the only thing it changed was I respected you even more for embracing the person that you were and not trying to hide that. So, I mean, I think, like, if you really care about someone, one thing isn't going to change your perception of them. Like, you're still, like, I love you like a brother no matter what. And, like, that's not going to change just because of your sexuality or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, like I said, that hearing that meant the world. I guess, why don't we, so on that topic, I mean, you said you had some very, very tough times that you've had to work through, and I think it's been admirable to see how you've worked through them, because I think people can go two routes. They can accept what is and learn from it and push forward, or they can spiral, right, and go the wrong direction. Yeah. And I think you've done everything possible to do something that's going to be healthy for you. Have you ever been to therapy? One, and if you have, what's your experience been? What would you say if someone came up to you on the street and asked what your thoughts around it are? And if you haven't, like, what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, and this is another topic that, like, I don't go around telling people, yeah, I've been to therapy, but
right.
if you ask me about it, like, I will tell you, like, yeah, I have been, and I think it's a great tool for all people. You don't have to be going through, terrible things to make use of therapy. Like, I think it can apply and help you out in just your everyday life. But for me, I did something that I don't recommend. I waited till I was at my rock bottom to seek outside help. And that situation was dealing with the death of my father. I was having relationship issues. Mentally, I was in a bad space. And it got to the point where I couldn't take it on all by myself. And that's when I sought some help, and I got involved in therapy. And finding a good therapist is like dating. Like, you're not going to like all the therapists you start with. I was lucky enough, my first one that I had was good, and I went to her once a week for a couple months, and it really helped me more so just get my emotions and thoughts out of my head and process those. And she gave me a lot of helpful tips. And I stopped after a while, and when I moved to Tampa 2 years ago, I found myself like I should get back into it. Life's good right now, but I still think it would be beneficial. And I went to a couple different ones, and I wasn't as happy with the relationship. We just didn't connect as well. So I've recently started up again, and I think I found someone I like going to. But for me, I would encourage people that if you have any questions or have any inclination about considering therapy, like, I think it's a great tool that you can use in your life, good or bad times.
Yeah.
Shaun, you mentioned rock bottom. I'm just curious for help paint a picture for us, because I think a lot of people can be in denial of being at rock bottom per se. And you're like, what's a day in the life of Shaun at rock bottom versus what's a day in the life today? And just to help paint a picture of that growth or progress.
Oh, I mean, rock bottom for me was I couldn't focus on any task or anything aside from how down I felt about my current situation. Why are these things happening? Why do I feel this way? To the point where it was affecting my relationships with my friends. I was kind of isolating myself. And those times were extremely tough. And nowadays, I've worked on myself over the years, and it's night and day difference. Like, I try to be as social and as outgoing as I can and try new things, and those things really help me mentally grow as a person. So it's a complete difference, and I'm in a better space now. But like, everything's not perfect. This is it's I didn't make it. It's not like this is the final spot for me. Like, I'm still a work in progress.
So, what prompted you to get therapy? Because I needed someone to basically recommend it to me, not force it on me. I knew I needed to be ready. But was there someone close to you that was like, hey, maybe you should try this out? What kind of prompted you to get it? Because I know I had a stigma going in.
No one I really knew that I was aware of was going to therapy, so it's not like they pointed me in that direction. It was more so, like I said, I wasn't good with sharing my feelings or that open, and I was like, at least if I can find someone that's completely unbiased and get, their objective opinion, and it doesn't affect my relationships or anything, like, that would be a good start for me. And that's what really propelled me to feeling more comfortable just talking about these, quote unquote taboo subjects.
So,
go ahead.
So you had because we've talked to a few people now that have had experiences with therapy, and you had also mentioned you're normally or typically more closed off. I don't know about maybe today, that's a little bit different, but like, when you go to therapy, when you went initially, were you like, all right, here are the topics I want to cover, boom, 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 or did you maybe dance around the bush a little bit, and or did you just go head on, tackle those specific areas?
Yeah.
What was that like curriculum, if you will?
Oh, for me, it was, I was at my lowest point, so I literally walked into my first appointment, and it was just word vomit, like, from my childhood to now, and she was trying to just take it all in, and it was a lot. So there wasn't really a set agenda or anything like that. And then after that, we broke it down, like, piece by piece, certain things that happened, as I was a kid, growing up, how I'm doing now. You only can, bite off little chunks at a time. But my first appointment, it was, I was just spewing in there. But it felt good.
Honestly, it didn't feel great for me. That was like the first time I had to really accept who I was and actually speak the words out loud. And it was very painful. But I mean, that's therapy. It's hard work. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize. I definitely don't realize is like you get in there, it's not going to be everything's not going to be great. Like you're addressing demons, you're addressing trauma, you're addressing whatever it is you're addressing. That's painful.
It is.
And it's hard work, but that's how you get to the place that I think you're probably in now. And I'm, in a much better spot, but it didn't come through without months of, feeling down in the dumps. So I guess I've asked this question before to another person on our podcast that had experienced some trauma. And I want to ask you, is there anything that's happened in your life, like of all, the traumatic experience, whatever it might be that you've had, would you take any of it back if you could? And I ask that question because I think about it for myself, and I've said this in the show before, but I'll repeat it. Like my sexuality is a place of shame for a really, really long time. And now it's at a point where I can truthfully say, like, I'm proud of who I am, and I would not change who I am if I could go back and, because I wouldn't have had all these life lessons. I wouldn't have endured what I've had to endure. So I don't think I would change anything. So my question to you, and there is no right answer, but my question is there anything that you would change? Would you take anything back?
I don't even really entertain that question because I can't change anything. So even thinking back and, I wish this didn't happen, or why did this happen, and questioning things, it's like, I'm just wasting energy at that point, and I got to take it for what it's worth and either make the best of it or not. But I mean, it's not a matter of, I wish I could change it, because I think everyone has those thoughts, but it's really not productive thoughts to have.
Well, phrased differently, or maybe from a different angle, based on your growth, based on your progress, are you maybe grateful for having seen rock bottom? And, because I hear Mike Tyson talk about it, right? Where, like, there's beauty in having been, and I don't want, not beauty within the why you are at rock bottom, but beauty in knowing that you've been there, and now you've climbed up out of it and to the top of where you're at. And like you said, nothing's ever perfect, but you're perhaps at a peak today, and, maybe tomorrow's even more of a peak, but having been at rock bottom, having climbed up out of it, are you perhaps grateful for that experience?
That's very well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I try to put a positive spin on anything that I can. And yes, these things happen, and I was down when it happened, and I wish it didn't happen. But like you said, I don't know if I would have had the same growth that I've had over the years and be in the place where I'm at if those events didn't occur. So in a sixth sense, I am grateful that, some of those traumas happened, but it makes me the person who I am today, and that's all I can do with it. Just try to grow and make the best out of it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, again, going back to when you said that you were often closed off for a while, like, I'm curious, I have my perspective, but how have your relationships evolved as you've been able to be more open? Has it been able to understand your feelings a little bit more as you've allowed yourself to feel things a little bit more? Like, how have your relationships with, one, yourself, but also with others, like, how have those evolved?
It's been really cool to see the progress that I've made with, accepting myself and not being as hard on myself about things. And then also, and recently, like especially over the past couple of years, like I've been able to connect with some of my friends on a deeper aspect, and being able to talk about those things. And some of the times we're going through similar situations, it just makes those bonds stronger. So it's a cool feeling when you can get to that point with somebody. And I don't like every time I see the guy, or whoever it may be, dumping all my problems on him. Like, that's not what I'm here to do. But every once in a while, when you could have a heart-to-heart conversation, I think that's beneficial for both sides.
It's also just knowing that you have you have someone there to be able to have that conversation if you need to. Like a lot of that is just having that sense of security that if I am struggling with something or I really need to talk about something, like I have Shaun that I can go talk to, or I have whomever that I can go talk to. Because I agree, and that's ultimately why I sought out therapy, is because at that time there were only two people that I felt like I could talk about my struggles with, and that was my sisters. And I mean, the first couple of days, like I was just blowing them up with like, well, what does this mean? What now? What do I do? This and that. And I mean, not only are they not equipped to answer those questions, it's like I don't want to put that type of burden on someone. And so that's also where I think therapy can come into play. But I think, yeah, to your point, I think it's just knowing that you have those tight-knit people in your life that you can go to. Because, I mean, like our conversations, for example, like it's not always, heart to hearts. It's nice to be able to have them, and they're super meaningful, but we still shoot the shit. And that's like a true, full friendship and relationship.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Shaun, you said like you did what you're not supposed to do, I think is how you phrased it, and you waited until you met rock bottom. Why the delay? Like, what was it? The stigma of it? Was it pride? Was it this feeling that you were giving up an element of toughness? What was it? What were maybe some of the factors, if any of what I mentioned or anything that I didn't mention? What were some of the factors that delayed you from going?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of all of those things. Growing up, it did have a stigma attached to it, especially our generation. Being a male, like you got to be tough. Like just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going. You don't need therapy. Therapy's weak, and that's like the complete opposite from the truth. Like the strongest people I know seek outside help. So yeah, I mean, that's really what I'd say.
Like something you normally would pride yourself on, and like toughness, like because not everybody's the same, and I only know you so much through association, but
right.
Is that something, like I for sure know that there's an element of toughness I try to uphold. Can you relate with that?
Yeah, for sure. And especially like I didn't have any role models in my life that were males that opened up like that or said, I go to therapy. So my dad was very closed off and even cold, especially when I was growing up. And he basically taught me, just toughen up, dude. Like that's life. Like you'll get over it. Just keep powering through. So there is a toughness aspect where it's like, I had thoughts if I go, do therapy, like does that make me a weak person? And you learn that's not the case.
So do you like carry that with you now? Because I think what a lot of men can fear is the moment I go into therapy, I've dropped my toughness. But do you see it as like you're carrying it through with you, and it's like I can still be a tough guy. I can still have that mentality. I can still perceive myself as a tough guy while also supplementing with outside help. Is that how you feel currently?
How I feel currently is I think it makes me even tougher. I'm building up that armor, having that conversation, those tough conversations, learning more about, why I act certain ways and how I can handle myself in the future. And like knowing that information just makes me feel, even tougher and even more ready to handle what's to come in the future, because there's going to be more traumas and more downward parts of life.
Because toughness, right, these traits, like you can measure it with different metrics.
Right.
And so if you measure toughness by ability to suppress emotion or ability to keep to yourself, like, sure, right? Like if that's how you want to define and measure toughness, okay, right? But your point is like we can sustain toughness, but now it's toughness through the metric of self-awareness, through the ability to control and understand your emotion, and I think that's really important for men that want to maintain a reputation or a persona or a perception of themselves as I'm tough. Just change the metric, just change how you're measuring that, and I think that knowledge is power, self-awareness piece can really start to shift the way that we think about toughness.
And to me, suppressing emotions is quite the opposite. Like, that's weak. That it is easy to suppress your emotions. It's very hard to go up to someone and say, hey, I am feeling this way. It's not a good feeling, and this is why I'm feeling this way. It is much harder to do that than it is to take these emotions and shove them aside and keep it within and keep it internal.
Yeah, but that's just where the stigma is.
I'm just saying, like, that's why I feel very passionate around that topic, because I hate the idea of, and I get where it came from, but again, suppressing emotions to me is a sign of weakness. And I only speak, again, I get it's hard, and I'm not trying, if anyone's doing that or going through, like, I totally empathize. I've done that for a long time, so I get it. But to me, that is more of a sign of a lack of strength, right? Because you're not being vulnerable. And what happens is, the more you suppress, like, the worse it tends to get. The problem doesn't go away. Right. The feelings just get stronger, and it kind of bleeds into different facets of your life and how you treat other people and how you feel. It makes you a worse person. And even, like, again, I think I've said this before, but I've always tried to be. I've been taught at an early age to be a nice person, to be a kind person. It is much harder to do that when you don't love yourself and you don't feel good about something in your life and you haven't addressed it. Like, it often for me felt like I had to remind myself, like, I would see myself being a dick for whatever reason, or being an asshole, or find myself getting angry over something that's, like, just doesn't matter at the end. And I had to remind myself, like, oh wait, why am I doing, like, I'm supposed to be nice, you know, like, I have something I've always valued, where now it's much easier. I don't have to think twice about it, because I've addressed what was causing me so much stress and so much anxiety and so much shame that then led to, right, these negative feelings. And so, yeah, I totally agree with what both of you said. And I was going to ask, like, were your parents, because, sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, but my parents weren't always, like, emotionally available, or they weren't the most emotionally intelligent people. And I could go to, you know, my dad's my guy, and my mom I could go to for literally just about anything, and she'd be there for me. But when it came to, like, dealing with my emotions, I don't know that they were always there for me. And it's, again, maybe their parents weren't there for them. But I'm just curious, like, you kind of already alluded to it with your dad and him, you know, being kind of cold and telling you just toughen up. Like, was your mom kind of the same way? Because I didn't have that, and I think it explains a lot of why I grew up the way I did and how I dealt with things.
Yeah, I think my mom and my dad were complete opposites. My mom was, you know, overly caring, and she would put anyone before herself. You know, I love my mom to death. She is just such a kind person. But I think growing up, and something that I'm working through now is, my parents got divorced right after I graduated high school. And, you know, my whole childhood, I saw that something wasn't right with them. Like, they would get into arguments all the time, and, you know, they didn't get along that well, and they took it out on each other and on us as kids. And, you know, I found myself, like, I didn't want to talk to either one of them about how I felt. And seeing that type of, you know, marriage and relationship, I think kind of hindered my point of view on relationships as I got older. But yeah, I mean, it was really tough for me because, you know, my dad, I'll tell you a little bit more about my childhood. When I was in high school, right after going into my junior year of high school, my dad took a job in Miami. And like any normal family would, you know, the whole family moves to Miami, you know, new job, that's where they go. And my mom was adamant about, you know, me staying in Jacksonville and finishing my high school where I started. So my dad moved to Miami, and my mom stayed in Jacksonville, and I stayed with my mom. And technically they were still married, but, you know, I'd only see my dad once a month. And, you know, my dad was always the disciplinary. And when he went to Miami, you know, God bless my mom, but I kind of walked all over her. I had free reign in the house, coming and going. You know, I was like what you said. I was a dickhead in high school and even some in college. And I think, you know, seeing that happen, and then as soon as I graduated high school, my sister came in town and they sat us down in the living room, and they acted like it was going to be like some shocking news to us. They're like, yeah, we're getting a divorce. And me and my sister were like, you guys should have done this years ago. Like, all we want is you guys to be happy, and we could tell you guys weren't happy. So, you know, it's been tough for me relationship wise and navigating that, because I didn't have the best example growing up. And it led me to not wanting to open up to either one of them, and that spiraled into me suppressing my feelings until I was, an adult and had to actually handle some real shit, and it boiled over. And that's what, I finally got to that point, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've started to draw those same storylines or comparisons with some of our other friends, with, like, in conversation with them, not behind their back or anything like that, but this idea of what you're exposed to growing up, with how your parents are dealing with conflict, the kind of impacts that can have on you as a kid, right? Where you don't feel like you have an outlet to channel your emotions or to be open and honest and vulnerable. And then, we get to that point now, about 40-something minutes into our conversation, and it's funny how, not hilarious, but like funny how we can connect the dots back to one of the first things you said in this conversation, which is like, you're not normally an open person.
Right.
And through conversation, we're able to, again, knowing you sparingly through association, being able to kind of connect that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, so because I think you can go two ways. Like, did you see things in your parents, their relationship, where you now growing up are like, okay, this is what I don't want? Because I think you can look at it two ways. Like, I think obviously the best thing is if you grow up in a household where, it's a very secure relationship. Both your parents are together, they love each other, it's genuine, they care for you, they're there for your emotional needs, they're there for your physical needs, yada, yada, yada. That often doesn't happen. And I think I'm just curious if you were able to take things and kind of spin it in a positive light of like, okay, well, yeah, I saw this and I don't want it, and like going forward into my relationship, like this is something that like I need to make sure is tidied up because I've seen what can happen if it's not.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I look at it now. Back when it was happening, I thought of it as a really negative situation. And to be transparent, I had a wonderful childhood overall. Like, I was super fortunate, and looking back, I wouldn't change anything. But now, viewing those events that happened and how my parents got along, it was more of a learning experience. Like, I could pick out pieces like, I want to be like that when I get older, or I don't want to be like that. I want to do this in a relationship. I don't want to do that. So it's more so me learning from, the way they did things right, and then also their mistakes and things that I didn't like, and putting that all together and being my own person. And, that's my goal when I look back at my childhood is just, build on that. And I hope the next generation, if I ever have kids, can look at me and do the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, well, I guess maybe we all do, layered some questions here, but, what are some of your core values just in life? Maybe like 1 to 3.
Yeah. So
It's a tough question, man.
It is. It really is. But I really
There's follow up.
Oh, great. I really think love trumps all. And like in high school, I was not that. I used to pick on people because I was insecure, or I thought it would make people laugh, and I acted certain ways. And nowadays, it's like I want to be the guy that everyone knows as, he has good intentions. He's truly just a kind dude. And it's like even with my friends now, like every time I sign off or like, we leave or part ways, it's like, I love you, man. And some of them get caught off guard. They're like, wait, what? Like they find it sometimes a little awkward.
But then eventually they'll start saying it, right?
Yeah,
exactly. And that's why you just gotta break that little like barrier.
Yeah. So, I think first and foremost, just respecting people, being kind, even if you don't know the person, show them that and they'll reciprocate it back to you. So I mean that's what I try to live my life by and put my best foot forward. And as long as I'm making progress in my life and trying to do the best for me and the people around me, I think the things that I want and the things that'll be good for me will fall in place.
And do you think love is a core value of yours because and you don't have to agree with this, you know, I'm just out of curiosity, do you think love is a core value of yours because you saw or grew up in an environment where you felt like there wasn't that true marriage type love between your parents, and you saw maybe the detriment that can have to how it was being a kid in that household?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I got plenty of love as a kid, especially from my mom. But seeing them not have the best relationship just makes me want to love that much harder, and just really make people feel comfortable around me. And then in my closer relationships, just letting them know that I care about them, and I'll do whatever, you know, I can to help them out as well.
And I think you kind of answered it earlier. You said, when I grew up, when I was in high school, I didn't live this life of love.
Mm-hmm.
I was insecure. I was a dick. I picked on people. And I'm only saying this because I can relate to it so much. Now that you've changed and you've grown and you're able to love and be kind naturally without feeling the need to bring others down or pick on people, like, that's such a better way of living. Like, that is it's so much healthier. It's so much more fulfilling. Like, that would have been my answer to MD's question, is like, I've done the other thing. I've lived this life of hate, or not even, but just like insecurity and jealousy and envy and anger, and like living on this side of things is so much more fulfilling, and it's easier.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. I'll still be quick to roast my friends. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I only roast the people that I love now, and you know, I'm a jokester, so like I like to have fun with it. But you know, deep down, they know where I truly stand and what my intentions are.
Right.
So I think like the common theme is like, whether you're leading with vulnerability, whether you're being the opposite of who you were in the past, it sounds like we're trying to like be that silly cliche of like be the change you want to see in the world.
Sure.
But we're doing it at a one-to-one, like interpersonally with other people. We're showing love to people. We're being vulnerable and open with people. And I started to really take to the idea that you can be the change you want to see in people, or in a person, you know, and it requires you, Shaun, to continue to be a leader in the things that you value, which is love. It requires a responsibility on your shoulders every day, that you have that core value, that knowing that you have a responsibility, that you have to show love to people broadly, because that's in some ways your core mission. Mm-hmm. And the only way that you're going to accomplish that is if you do it consistently, and in that people will reciprocate that back to you.
Exactly.
And hopefully that's been your experience as you've gotten older.
For the most part, yeah.
And doing it when it might be hard to. Like, doing it when you're not in a good mood, when you're tired, when your dog has done some stupid shit. I'm talking to my dog, pissing me off today. But like, doing it when it might be harder to, when you might not really be in the mood to be kind, right? I think that's where it really challenges you. But when you're still able to, I think that's like a sign of real growth.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one question, because we were kind of talking about your childhood. So if you could give, 14-year-old Shaun advice from what you know now, like what would you tell him?
I would tell young Shaun to be confident in yourself, man, and don't let the opinions of others dictate your actions or your words. You know, I was so focused on not saying the wrong thing or trying to impress people or trying to fit in. It's embrace who you are and be confident. And another thing is, don't procrastinate, because that's one thing that I've made a bad habit of, and just don't do that. Try to get your work done earlier, and it'll be way better in the long run for you.
Yeah, I've asked that question a couple times now, and the answer is almost always the same. It's forget what other people think and embrace who you are. It's the same answer that 85-year-olds give when they're interviewed and they get asked, what do you wish you would have done more of, or what do you wish you would have done differently? And it's always, I wish I would have just embraced who I was. I wish I would have done things because I wanted to do them, not because I'm trying to please someone else, or or even your parents. I think that's very difficult, especially when you're a kid. But like, you can't always, even the people close to you, like you can't always please them. Like, you might have a different route you want to go in life. Like, I think about Jay Shetty, and his parents, middle class, was kind of the thing of, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you're a failure. That's what he was told. And so he he got a finance internship, realized he wasn't fulfilled by it at all, like it was exhausting. And then, just so happened to stumble upon a monk who was giving a speech, and he was like, holy shit, I feel so energized by this, like this is what I want to do. And he had to disappoint his parents to fulfill himself. And I think that's really difficult for us to do, especially at a young age. So I would echo that. I would tell myself like verbatim the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I would also say kindness is better than coolness. No one's going to remember, what outfit you wore back then or what the cool fad was, but they're going to remember how you treated them, and that's going to be the lasting impression. So I think, not trying to always, be the coolest or the best, but just treat people fairly and treat people nicely. I mean, that's what I would tell my younger self, because I definitely struggled with that when I was a kid.
Because, go ahead. You say something?
No, this all just reminds me of this, quote. I mean, not the kindness piece, but the being true to yourself and just disregarding how other people think of you, and freeing yourself of that burden. And I can't remember who wrote the quote, but it's just around that idea of we're always so focused and exhausting ourselves on trying to be normal when each of us can just be super insanely interesting instead, and be as unique as possible. And I think that starts with what you said, is being dedicated to who you are truly, and really freeing yourself of trying to appease what other people think.
Because what even is cool? I think about it now. It's what define cool.
It's the what the populace, the majority think, right? And it's collective, it's groupthink. So it really, at the end of the day, is not an objective.
Right, and it's whatever E channel or any of these social media reality shows portray as cool. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, cool is being yourself. Whatever you find interesting, that's cool. I admire the person that is going to be themselves, wonky or not. That's who I admire. I don't care about Joe Schmo who's wearing Gucci shoes and this and that and driving a Bugatti that. I mean, that's cool, but at the end of the day, I want someone that's true to themselves. Anyone that's true to themselves is cool to me, and I admire. We're kind of wrapping up here. I want to ask you one more question though before I go into the rapid fire, and answer this as honestly as possible. And your definition of happiness can be whatever it is, but are you happy right now? How are you doing in the most real sense? Not your coworkers asking you where you're yeah, I'm good, and you move on.
Yeah, how you doing? Living the dream,
Yeah. How many times have we said that?
Yeah, exactly. Happy is a term that people throw around, and I think it changes in different scales. I'm not the happiest I've ever been, but I'm happy with who I am as a person finally, and that's taken a long time to get to this point. And I'm happy with the direction of my life. So overall happiness, sure, yeah, I would say I'm happy.
Good to hear. I would echo that.
Yeah.
All right, rapid fire questions.
All right, here we go.
And first, and before these, just again, I want to thank you for coming on short notice too. I'm so glad you're able to do this. Obviously, I wish it could have been in person. Mm-hmm. We're not opposed to having guests on for a second time. I know you're coming out here in July for the B-Day, so we'll see what we can do. But no, thank you, Shaun, for coming on, man. It's been such a pleasure to have you and have a real conversation. Thank you for being open. Again, this is why I wanted you on, because I've started to realize too, we've had 3 or 4 women on in a row, and it's okay, I think that's because I'm starting to see that most open people tend to be women. It's hard to find guys that are willing to put themselves out there. Mm-hmm. And even though you said it was uncomfortable, you're yeah, let's do it. And I think that kudos to you for coming on here and sharing your story and just being yourself. That's not easy to do, and I applaud you for it. So anyway, first question. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten, or just a favorite quote, something that's really resonated with you?
Okay. All right, so it's not as much as advice as it is a quote, and it's short and simple, but it's no one is coming to save you. And I've heard that a lot, but it finally resonated with me. And when it did, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, when you're a kid, mom or dad can always come bail you out. Or if you're in school, the teacher's going to do everything they can to make you, pass because they don't want you to fail. It looks bad on them. But when you get into the real world, like, your life is 100% your responsibility. And if you don't take action, and you're not going to get to the places where you want to go in life, you're not going to reach that fulfillment or, check those goals off. So just knowing that no one is coming to save you, it's a harsh truth, but it's exciting at the same time because I have total control.
Man, I was nodding my head the entire time because I'm like, that is 100% fact. That's great. Okay, my favorite question. So if you could go to dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
That reminds me of that theoretical question I see on the internet all the time. Would you rather take $1 million or have dinner with Jay-Z or Warren Buffett? And, for business purposes, I think those would be great people to have dinner with. But for me, it's 100%, my dad, like, he passed away in 2019, and so much has changed since then. In my life and in the world in general, like, he never knew what COVID was. So I feel like I'm trying not to get emotional right now, but like, just being able to sit down with him and giving him an update on what I'm doing and talking about current events and sports and, everything that's going on in my life, I think he would be proud of me, and to be able to hear that from him would be, it would mean the world to me. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. That hits home. All right. Lastly, this is a little bit lighter for you. Favorite hobbies? Like, what do you like to do in your free time? I know you're a sneakerhead. You were collecting shoes up the ass when we were living together. So, what do you just like to do in your free time?
Yeah, I got a decent collection of sneakers. Not gonna lie, but in my free time, I have a lot of common interests like you do, and you and MD love, being active and working out, and I think that's why we get along so well. So if it's, going to the gym, lifting weights, playing any type of sport, whether it's pickup basketball, tennis, even pickleball I've gotten into recently, like, I try to do as much of that as I can, and I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's a wide range. Yeah, a wide range of podcasts. Obviously, Men in the Arena comes first, but no, it's comedy, finance, self-help, sports podcasts. Like, that's what I'm interested in. And I think lastly, just anything with my dog. I got a dog about 2 years ago, and the first couple weeks I was like, what did I get myself into? But he's really become my best friend, like everyone says, and. Whether it's going on walks or going to the beach or going on hiking trails, like anything with him, like I joke around and say he's my emotional support animal, but I'm only half joking. So
mine literally is. I had to sign her up so I could have her at the apartment. She's an emotional support animal.
Yep.
And you're coaching basketball now, so you're a coach too.
Yeah, that's right. That's another thing that I got out of my comfort zone. I wanted to do some volunteer work. Obviously, I love sports. So last fall, I just started sending a bunch of emails and calling some high school coaches in the area, and I got some bites back, and I ended up coaching and having a great experience last year, and I plan to do it again this year. All
right, I love that. All right, man. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you all for listening, again, for the support.
Thanks.
We're signing off here. We'll talk to you guys next week.
See you guys. See you, Shaun.